Welcome back to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today we're talking about ways parents can support their law students. Your Law School Toolbox hosts are Alison Monahan and Lee Burgess. That's me. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta. Alison also runs the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review or rating on your favorite listening app. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we'd love to hear from you. And with that, let's get started.
Welcome back to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today, we're talking about some ways that parents can support their law students. And we hear from parents, many of them lawyers themselves, pretty frequently, and they're asking how to support their kids who are in law school. So we decided to go through some things that we suggest and don't suggest if this is a scenario that you're in.
Yes. So I think the first thing that parents really need to remember is that this is your child's journey and not your own.
It's true.
It is their law school experience. Even if you always wanted to be a lawyer, or even if you are a lawyer, it's still their experience. And if they're not on board with any intervention or any help, it's really unlikely to be very effective.
Yep, that is definitely true. I mean, we see this sometimes with parents who sign their kids up for tutoring and they're really excited about it and it's going to be so great for the children. And then the kids don't really want to do it. So in that case, it's kind of just a waste of money because if your child doesn't actually want to do this, there's really no point.
Yeah. I think also we find over and over again that oftentimes we speak to the student or someone's child and they don't actually really want to be in law school. And so their struggles don't come from a lack of ability or struggling to figure out how to be a great law student. They just don't have any inherent motivation to be there.
Yeah.
And law school is a hard and expensive thing to get through. And if you don't want to be there, I mean, maybe you shouldn't be there. It's just, and I don't think as a parent, I wouldn't want my kid to be there just to be there. I would want them to be there because they want to practice law. And I think a student's performance in law school often correlates with their desire to be there. If they don't want to be there, they're not going to perform very well.
Yeah, and I think, this is a hard thing because children don't want to disappoint their parents. And sometimes parents think they know what's best for their kids. And maybe you do, but if it's going to be 3 years of kicking and screaming and dragging your child through to graduation, I don't know. I mean, that just seems like a lot.
Well, and I think that we often see this in the bar work that we do too, that someone didn't really want to be a lawyer and then doesn't really want to study for the bar.
Right.
And then if you don't get your law license, kind of what's the point?
I mean, we've even seen people almost essentially fail the bar on purpose, I would say, or maybe not entirely on purpose, but there's some people occasionally where you talk to them and think they're going to be upset that they failed and they're actually happy. And it's always a weird moment where you're like, okay, so what else is going on here?
Yeah. I mean, when I have a student either in the law school space or the bar exam space where I can feel like there's some sort of hesitation going on, I often ask, why do you want to do this?
Right.
Why do you want to be a lawyer? Why do you want to study for the bar and be licensed? And sometimes people will really be honest and say, I'm not sure that I do.
Right. Yeah. And, it's kind of sad when someone's parents have kind of pushed them into this and spent a ton of time and money and energy. And in the end, it's just a lot of time, money, and energy that was spent and didn't really actually pay off with very much. And they're probably going to have to find a different career path anyway. So maybe just cut that short if your kid doesn't actually want to do this.
Yeah. I think there are plenty of ways that parents can be very helpful, though.
Yes, definitely. Assuming that your child actually wants this.
Exactly. Your child wants this and maybe they're struggling and you want to support them. I think there are plenty of ways that you can support. And I think that especially if you're not a lawyer and cannot necessarily give, advice on performing in law school, you can do a lot of things to make the rest of their life easier. So maybe you could help with food, either give them, a gift certificate for food delivery, or maybe if you're close by, you can cook food and fill their freezer. But any way to keep your law student eating healthy so they don't hopefully get sick, especially during final exams, can be a really big deal. And you end up eating a lot of pizza in law school. And so anything you can do to not eat pizza all the time is just great.
And I think the key here is just ask your child, directly what would be helpful, and maybe give them some suggestions like, hey, I want to make sure that you are able to eat well. What would be most useful? Do you want a gift card for Instacart to make your own stuff? Or would you rather have, delivery services that can bring you food that's already made? Do you want to join a CSA? I'll pay for any of this. What do you want?
Right.
And similarly, things like keeping the house clean. Do you want to pay for a cleaner? Or, if you have a pet, taking care of the pet, pet sitting, if they need to go to the library a lot, all of these kind of things, I think, are areas where parents can actually be really effective.
Yes. Even if your child needs help with medical appointments or mental health appointments, I think a parent often can tell when their child is struggling, maybe even before other people can tell. And I think that, using your influence to say, hey, it sounds like you are really down. Have you considered going to the mental health services at your school? Or, are you taking walks every day or getting out of the house or, whatever it might be? I think you can often as a parent notice some of these things because you know your child very well, and can help them, manage some of these challenges as they might come up.
Right. You could also pay for a gym membership, for example, or classes, drop-in classes, class pass, things like that. There are a lot of things that don't have anything really directly to do with school that would just help out a lot in kind of the logistics of life and just making sure that they can focus on school and classes and not be worrying about do I have enough dog food and can I feed myself something? And hey, cash is always welcome, I will say.
Yeah, I know, right?
I remember being in school and I'd get an envelope from one of my parents or grandparents or something with $20 in it. And I'm like, wow, this is great.
I know, right? It's totally true.
It doesn't have to be that much.
Yeah. And depending on what stage of life your law student is in, I think you can tailor what you think would be the most helpful to that, So if they are living in, school and housing might be one thing versus, maybe your child has their own family, maybe is working and studying. I think we oftentimes talk to a lot of law students and bar takers who have children, and the grandparents are often a key piece in allowing that law student or studier to have the time to study. They often are really pitching in. And so sitting down with your child and saying, what do you need and how can we be helpful? If you can provide that help, is really key. Takes a village.
It does. And I think just thinking about ways that you can help them free up time and energy is always going to be appreciated.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's also important that parents encourage their students to use the resources of the school. I think that sometimes it can be very hard, especially for 1Ls, to realize that their school may offer them a lot of support. So things like career services, they have an academic support office, and some of these resources may not have existed. If you're a lawyer parent, schools are a little different than maybe when you went and got your license. So some of these offices may not have existed, and now they're really kind of key resources for your law students. So academic support, law librarians, going to their office hours of their professors, talking to teaching assistants if you have teaching assistants or tutors for your classes, mental health services at school, disability services, the dean's office. There are a lot of resources, and encouraging your law student to work with the school to try and solve their challenges is really, really helpful.
Right, because these people, they're there in a job, they're being paid, and they know more typically about the school, about the process, about options, frankly, than most parents do. I mean, why would you know these things? You don't know what the process is if your student needs to take a break for a while or something like that. So I think just drawing on these resources, which I think have gotten better over time, and just helping the student almost brainstorm in some cases. Okay, well, it sounds like you're struggling in this class. What do you think might help? Do you think going to talk to your professor might help in office hours? Oh, okay. What are some questions you might bring to them? And just almost helping them role play that scenario, which can be intimidating. So it's not that you have to provide the answers necessarily. And it may be that they'd rather talk to a TA, and maybe they'd rather do it over email or whatever. But just helping them kind of get a sense of what the options might be, I think can be really helpful.
Yeah. And, I think for parents who pretty much universally want to make their children's lives better, sometimes the struggle point is that you can't move all the obstacles out of the way because law school's hard for just about everyone. And there's going to be some struggle. It's expected.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah. And you can't fix it, unfortunately.
Right. And I mean, if you could fix it, you probably even then it wouldn't be beneficial because your student needs to go through the struggle to actually master the material and set themselves up, to pass the bar exam, to be a competent lawyer. If you just take it all out of the way, they're not going to learn anything.
Yeah. Yeah. They need to struggle a little bit to find their own footing, to be their own lawyer. I think, you don't really want to hire a lawyer that hasn't had to figure out how to do hard things.
Right, because that's where the confidence comes from of saying, okay, I've done this difficult thing. I've been through this difficult experience. I've developed some skills. I feel confident that I can help you with your problem. Without that, they're never going to have the confidence to do the job.
Yes, 100%. I also think it's important for parents to appreciate that law school is graded on a curve. And so even if your child was used to getting, let's say, all A's, they're going to start getting grades that they maybe have never seen before. And this is very normal. And you don't want to kind of minimize this by just saying things like, you're so smart. I'm sure you're going to get all A's, and then they get a C. And then you're like, why'd you get a C?
Does that mean you're not smart?
Right. Should you not be in law school? It's just a different beast than other professional schools and, most undergraduate grading.
Yeah. And I think that's just really important to understand because you might think as a parent, of course, it's helpful to tell my child how smart they are, but you can go get a great book. And we've done podcasts on this, with mindset and grit and all of these things. Where telling your child, oh, you're so smart. I'm sure you're going to get all A's in law school. As you said, when they don't get the A, it just causes them to think they're not smart. So rather than something like that, I think it's just important to say, this is a different educational experience. Like I get that, you're probably not going to get all A's. No one gets all A's. That's not expected. I think you're still a smart and competent person, even if you get grades that you're not, thrilled about, because that's just how this process works. I mean, no one, literally no one, I think, probably graduates from any law school with like actual straight A's.
I mean, it's few and far between.
I mean, like it would be incredibly rare.
Yeah. And I also think, giving feedback on the process is important too. So, I think, for example, let's say you are wondering what to say to your child and you can say things like, wow, you have really studied hard and really done your best. I see how hard you've been working. Like that's the kind of validation that I think is very helpful. The grades may fall where they may, but you should be proud of the work that you put in. You really, stuck your neck out. I could tell how hard you were working. Like that's the kind of validation that I think is much more beneficial.
Oh, definitely. And just, making it clear that no one's expecting them to get the grades that they got to get into law school because it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And I think, and helping them focus really on things that are under their control versus the grade. Did you go into that exam feeling like you had prepared to the best of your ability? If so, then you've done your best. That's all you can do.
Yep.
You can't control how the person sitting beside of you does. And that's what determines the curve. So if you walk into an exam and you do your absolute best and you've prepared, that's all you can do. And, there's really like the grades come down where they come down and you deal with them at that point.
Yeah. So it's also important for parents to really appreciate when they need to intervene, when there is a true struggle and figuring out how you can help them. So I do appreciate when parents reach out to us about tutoring because that is a lovely gift for your student as long as they are bought in that it will be helpful. But finding some outside support to answer your students' questions, to provide resources that you cannot provide is great. So we definitely don't want to not encourage people to reach out and purchase help for their law students. It's just that you want to make sure that they're bought into the process.
Right. And I think this can be, it could be literally substantive tutoring, someone to work with on these skills, but it could also be something a little more amorphous, like life coaching or career coaching. If maybe they're in, past that first year and they're in the second or third year and they're saying, oh, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know, if this is the right fit for me, that is a great time to invest in a little bit of life or career coaching to just help them figure out like, what is my path?
Yeah.
And the same with therapy, like schools don't offer this, but you can also help them kind of navigate that process or get a private therapist. I mean, and not everyone is open to this, but for people who are, I think it can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah. I think that there are times when only a parent can really step in and tell their child that they need to reach out for assistance. And so thinking about doing it in a really kind way, but helping remove barriers so they can get the help that they need can be a huge gift.
Yeah, it doesn't benefit anyone to just randomly let your child struggle if they don't have to. But I think,
Right.
It's always this balance of how do you intervene in a way that's going to be helpful without being overbearing and, pushing them down a path that maybe is not the right path for them.
Yeah. I think another thing that parents can really do is be thoughtful what you're asking from your law student kids around the holidays, especially the ones near exam time.
True. So true.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving is always Thanksgiving that
Always
gets you.
Thanksgiving. Yeah. Or even this year, I feel like a lot of schools are going to have finals that run very close to the Christmas holidays if you celebrate Christmas. I'm not sure off the top of my head when Hanukkah starts this year, but I think that it's going to be schedules are going to be tight.
Right.
Schedules are going to be tight this year. And so I think you really want to lower your expectations that things will be as they always have been. And just remember that your holiday season, which may not be any more stressful than usual, is going to be very different than your law students' holiday seasons, which are going to be full of final exams.
Yeah. And that's hard, because I get that people have a lot invested in this idea that, well, it's Thanksgiving. Everyone comes to the same table and we all fly from across the country and we all sit together and we all have this meal and we've always done it that way. But if you're law students across the country and the weather is bad and they're getting ready for exams, I mean, this is tough.
Yeah, it's really tough. So just have, keep an open mind.
Right. And I would say, check in early, check in often, make it clear, hopefully, that, we want you to do what you need to do. We understand this might be different. We're here for you regardless. You can zoom into the holiday if you need to. But, there may be some disappointment on both sides. And I just think, that's normal.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, I have some special advice for lawyer parents.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah,
I know.
You went to law school with 2 lawyer parents.
I did. I did. Well, first, I think there were benefits to that because, one, I grew up kind of understanding what the law school experience was. And I think they were kind about things like holidays, and they did remember kind of what some of those stressors were. And I think I have the benefit as you're interviewing for jobs and kind of understanding what's kind of the norms within the profession. It is a lot easier if you have someone in your house who can demystify some of that for you. So I think that is a benefit of having a lawyer parent. I think the tricky thing is that what happened in your day is maybe not exactly what is happening now. And when it comes to advice around exams or how things should be done, the exams don't necessarily look exactly the same as the exams in your day. And so, giving advice that is, approachable and may be able to shift with the changing times is great, but don't say like, this is how we outlined, this is how we did this, and this is how we did this, when exams are just a little bit different. They might look different. They might be more open book and yours might used to be closed book. You've got to make sure that you're not just assuming that everything is as it was, maybe 20 years ago when you went to law school.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's that balance again of, what information do I have that's really useful that you probably are not aware of based on my experience versus what am I just telling you what things were like a million years ago that is totally not relevant.
Yep, exactly. So if you're a lawyer parent, just be kind with your law student. Just remember that their experience isn't necessarily your experience. And I think that will help you be supportive, but not necessarily kind of lecturing them on your wisdom, assuming their experience is going to be the same.
Right. And I think, lawyer parents, it might have been the case that, you came into this experience really driven and this was definitely what you wanted. And maybe you were, overcoming some life challenges in your background and you became the successful lawyer. And that's, fantastic. But now your child, you have to realize, has grown up in a completely different world from that. And they may not have that same level of intrinsic motivation to succeed or do whatever. And so I think this, it can get kind of tricky.
Yeah, I think it can. Well, I mean, when I think about, my kids are like elementary school age, so I'm very far away from possibly having one of them want to attend law school. But I know that when parents do get a little bit over involved or more of the helicopter parent persona that we hear about so much, it does come up from a place of love. And if you're a law student listening to this, you do have to kind of say, okay, my parents love me and they want the best for me. But if you're not getting the support that you need from your parents, one of your jobs is to go to them and say, this is how you can support me. Because I think that sometimes some of this overstepping is just that they're not sure how to be supportive. So as the person who needs supporting, you can say, these would be the 5 things that would be very helpful, and then try and help channel your parents' energy into something positive.
Right, because this is coming from a place, as you said, of love and concern. And it's really just a question of helping them figure out how to help you. And this is almost an ongoing life process as well. Some of this is also about like the separation of you becoming a grown-up.
Yep.
And this is a tricky time of life for a lot of people. And I think helping your parents understand how to support you is really critical here.
Yeah. Yeah, oftentimes this is kind of the big separation
right.
of going to professional school and maybe moving away, and maybe you're not on their health insurance anymore, and you're not on, the entanglements start to separate a lot faster as you kind of go on to your next thing. So it can be a very different experience for parents as well.
Right. I think there can be a feeling of a loss of control, that they're not going to be able to supervise you as closely, and that's all normal, but it doesn't mean it's easy.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I don't have any problems with control. I'm sure it's going to be easy for me to let my kids go out and make their own mistakes.
I know. I was like, you're not really that far for them being in college already. So
I know.
Crazy, but true.
It happens. It happens faster. That everybody says it happens fast, and then COVID hits, and you're time becomes a huge time warp. And now, but speaking of one thing that's different, I think one thing that is different is a lot of your law students are taking classes online, or having part of their legal career online. And that's going to be something else that you have to be aware of, that there are going to be unique challenges with that. Thank you, COVID.
Right. Well, I guess the other side of that, which is positive, is that some of these resources that were not previously available online may be available online.
True.
So that might make them more accessible. And, sometimes I think parents can help, again, with sort of like brainstorming ideas like, I can't talk to anyone at the school because their mental health people are full. Okay, well, I've heard that there's this app we can try. Like, have you thought about that? Those kind of things can be helpful.
Yeah. One other thing we didn't talk about that I would say is, if you know that your law student needs to get accommodations and they are struggling getting all of their materials together, I think especially if evaluations happened when the parent was more involved, maybe the parent was even getting copies of those records, I think it is helpful to try and make sure that the student has everything that they need to get through that process, because that is kind of critical and very paperwork heavy and sometimes a little emotional to do. And I think that's another thing that parents can be helpful with, especially if you hold some of that documentation.
Right. And sometimes the accommodations are around things like executive functioning, which makes it difficult to get
the accommodations. Yeah, I know. It's really difficult. Oh, and one more thing. This is something my mom did for me, which is super helpful. Tell your parents to keep some sort of list of everywhere that you've lived, because it's very helpful when you at some point have to apply for your bar license or get security clearance somewhere. My mom did that because my dad had security clearance, and she had just knew that it was at some point going to come down the pipeline. And so she kept very careful notes of everywhere that I'd lived. And now things like Amazon do have that information, but it's also very helpful if your parents provide record keeping.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think it's useful too, if you're a parent, you can try to get to know like your kids' friends and roommates and the people that are important to them. Mm-hmm. So, if you visit, like, I remember being in boarding school in high school, and, my parents would come and they'd take me and my roommate out to dinner, and we'd get to do a little bit of shopping at the mall and things like that for our necessities and stuff like that. Doesn't seem like a super big deal, but I think it can help a lot in like allowing people to feel supported.
Yeah, I think that that's true. I know. I was very lucky in undergrad that my roommate's parents lived in town. And on Sunday night, her mom would send, I always had something on Sunday night, so I couldn't go to their house, but she would send me home homemade Sunday night dinner, which was this chicken with this apple stuffing. I mean, I still dream about this chicken. I should just write to her and be like, what's the chicken recipe? Because it was so good. But she would make me chicken with stuffing like almost every Sunday. It was so
That's
sweet.
so nice.
I know, it really was.
Yeah, so I think sometimes it's like the little things more than like a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think, everybody's got to understand that, parents and law students are all going through a big kind of challenging traditional time, and that everybody, should be given the benefit of the doubt. But by clear communication, you can give the support that would actually be helpful and maybe receive the support that you actually need.
Definitely.
And that's many years of therapy right there. Boom.
In a nutshell.
Well, any final thoughts before we wrap it up for today?
No, I think my thought is just always, this is a balance. Like you want to be supportive without being overbearing. And if everyone can just extend a little grace and hopefully recognize that this is all coming from a positive place, even if it is potentially manifesting in a negative manner, then, kind of reevaluate what's actually helpful.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, we're out of time. If you enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on your favorite listening app. We'd really appreciate it, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. And if you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Alison at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or Alison@lawschooltoolbox.com. Or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.